She found him sprawled across the pristine white wool, a spill of crimson spreading from his side like a dark halo. He was bleeding out, and he was aiming a matte black silencer straight at her heart. The air conditioning in the Obsidian Tower had been humming its artificial silence for 12 hours straight. It was the kind of expensive, filtered chill that kept the orchids in the lobby blooming and cut straight through thin polyester uniforms. Nancy D. Pratt watched her reflection warp in the polished brass of the room number plate, 2401. The digital clock on her cart blinked 2:14 a.m. She'd been on her feet since 6 that morning, classes at the community college until noon, then straight into the double-shift housekeeping grind. She'd started her nursing prerequisites a year ago before switching to extra shifts when her tuition hike hit. In the end, the debt forced her to trade her stethoscope for a spray bottle. "Lock it." The command was a wet rasp, bubbling up from a chest full of blood. Kang Min-tae's knuckles were white against the grip of the pistol, but the barrel was wavering, tracing shaky circles in the air. He was running on fumes and adrenaline, and the tank was empty. Nancy stood paralyzed, the service tray slipping from her numb fingers to land with a muffled thud on the carpet. The pristine wool was already ruining, soaking up the red spilling from his side. "Did you hear me?" His eyes, dark and glassy with shock, narrowed. "Lock the door. Now." Nancy opened her mouth to scream, to beg, to explain she was just here to turn down the sheets, but the sound of heavy boots in the hallway froze the air in her lungs. They weren't the soft, hurried steps of guests or the rhythmic clacking of housekeeping carts. These were slow, deliberate, predatory. "Sweep the floor," a voice said from just outside, low, mechanical, and terrifyingly calm. "Check every room. Any witnesses, clean them up. We don't leave until the dragon is dead. Clean them up." The cold reality hit Nancy harder than the sight of the gun. She wasn't a bystander anymore. She was loose ends. Her paralysis shattered. Nancy lunged for the door, her fingers fumbling with the brass deadbolt. She slid it home with a harsh clack, then scrambled to hook the security chain. It felt flimsy, a joke against men who spoke about murder like it was a checklist. "It won't hold," she whispered, the panic rising in her throat like bile. She grabbed the heavy mahogany console table near the entryway. Her sneakers squeaked on the marble foyer as she shoved it, her shoulder burning with the effort. She drove it against the door just as the handle jiggled from the outside. A keycard beeped. The electronic lock disengaged, but the deadbolt held. Then came a heavy thud against the wood, a shoulder check. The console table shuddered, scraping an inch across the floor, but it didn't give. "Housekeeping," a voice called out, mocking and light. "Open up." Nancy backed away, her hands trembling, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She turned back to the man on the floor. Min-tae was trying to stand. He had used the wall for leverage, dragging himself upright, his face a mask of gray agony. "Give me the gun," he groaned, reaching out with a blood-slicked hand. He took one step toward her, intending to protect the entrance, but his body betrayed him. His knees buckled. "No." Nancy rushed forward, instinct overriding terror. He collapsed before she could reach him, sliding down the silk wallpaper and leaving a broad, dark smear behind him. The handgun clattered from his grip, skidding out of reach. He hit the floor hard, his head lolling back, eyes fluttering shut. Nancy dropped to her knees beside him. The blood was everywhere, hot, metallic, and flowing too fast. If she didn't stop the bleeding, the men outside wouldn't need to break in. He'd be dead before they cleared the lock. Dead weight was a specific kind of heavy, dense, uncooperative, and terrifying. Nancy gritted her teeth, hooking her arms under Kang Min-tae's armpits, and heaved. Her sneakers skidded on the blood-slicked floor, but inch by agonizing inch, she dragged him across the threshold into the master bathroom. The room was a palace of Italian marble and gold fixtures, now a triage center. She let him slide onto the cold tile, his head lolling against the bathtub. "Stay with me," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to him or herself. Nancy scrambled to the vanity, tearing open drawers. "Think. Anatomy and Physiology 101. Stop the bleed. Close the entry." She found the complimentary mending kit, a tiny packet containing a needle and 3 colors of thread. It was pathetic, meant for a loose button, not a bullet hole, but it was all she had. Next, the minibar. She snatched a bottle of Grey Goose vodka and a stack of white hand towels. Kneeling beside him, she ripped his shirt open. The buttons popped, scattering across the floor like pearls. The wound was just above his hip, a jagged, ugly tear. It was oozing sluggishly, dark and thick. "This is going to hurt," she warned, her voice trembling. Min-tae didn't answer, but his eyelids fluttered. Nancy unscrewed the vodka and poured it directly into the wound. Min-tae's body seized. A guttural sound ripped from his throat, his back arching off the tile. His hand shot out, gripping Nancy's wrist with bruising force. She didn't pull away. She just held his gaze, her heart hammering against her ribs, until the spasm passed and his grip loosened. "Sorry," she breathed. "I need to clean it." She threaded the needle with shaky fingers. The thread was black, fitting. Nancy took a deep breath, forcing herself to compartmentalize. The hotel room faded. The hitmen in the hallway faded. There was only the tissue, the needle, and the rhythm of the stitch, piercing the skin, pulling the thread, locking the knot. Her hands, which had been trembling violently just seconds ago, went still the moment they touched his skin. It was muscle memory from clinical rotations, the ghost of the career she'd lost to tuition hikes. Min-tae watched her through the haze of pain. His vision was blurring at the edges, tunneling down to the woman hovering over him. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, her jaw set hard. A maid in a polyester uniform, stitching him up with the precision of a surgeon. "You're not a maid," he rasped, the words slurring. Nancy didn't look up. She tied off the final stitch and bit the thread with her teeth. "Tonight, I'm whatever keeps you alive." She taped a folded towel over the stitches, pressing down firmly. Min-tae let his head fall back against the porcelain tub, the adrenaline crash finally catching him. He looked at the girl, really looked at her, and realized his life was in the hands of a ghost he'd never bothered to see. The electronic lock on the suite door chirped, a cheerful, ascending trill that sounded like a countdown. Then came the mechanical whir of the deadbolt retracting, followed immediately by the heavy thud of a shoulder ramming against Nancy's makeshift barricade. The mahogany console table groaned, skidding another inch across the marble. "They're overriding the system," Nancy whispered, the blood draining from her face. "That table won't hold for another minute." Min-tae pushed himself up on one elbow, his face slick with sweat. He reached for the empty vodka bottle, gripping it by the neck like a club. "Go," he wheezed. "Hide in the closet. I'll take the first one with me." "Shut up," Nancy snapped, fear giving way to a frantic, sharp-edged focus. "Nobody is dying in my station. Get up." She didn't wait for his permission. She hauled him upright, his arm draped heavy over her shoulders. He suppressed a groan as the movement pulled at his fresh stitches, his weight nearly crushing her. Nancy staggered but found her footing, half dragging him out of the bathroom, not toward the door, but deeper into the suite. "Where?" Min-tae gritted out. "Bedroom," she panted. "The wardrobe." She steered him toward the massive, built-in armoire that dominated the master bedroom. It was filled with plush robes and empty hangers, but Nancy pushed past the silk, shoving the heavy sliding door all the way back until it hit the stopper. She dropped to her knees and dug her fingernails into the seam of the back panel. "What are you doing?" "Smoking lounge," she muttered, yanking hard. The wood panel popped loose with a groan, revealing a dark, dusty void behind it. "Maintenance crawl space. It runs the length of the floor. Us maids use it when we need a break and the cameras are watching." The space was narrow, smelling of dry rot, fiberglass, and stale menthol cigarettes. "Get in," she ordered. Min-tae looked at the dark hole, then at the terrified determination in her eyes. He didn't argue. He slumped into the darkness, dragging his bad leg. Nancy followed instantly, pulling the false panel back into place just as a thunderous crash echoed from the foyer. The console table had given way. Nancy pulled the panel flush, plunging them into absolute blackness. She held her breath, pressing her hand over Min-tae's mouth instinctively. Through the thin wood and the layer of hanging clothes, The sounds of the invasion were muffled but terrifyingly distinct. Heavy boots crunched on glass. The beam of a tactical flashlight sliced through the gap in the wardrobe doors, illuminating the hems of the bathrobes just inches from Nancy's face. "Clear left," a voice barked. "Bathroom is bloody," another replied. "Fresh." Someone stitched him up. Nancy felt Min-tae's body tense against hers in the cramped dark. His heart was hammering against her back, a frantic rhythm that matched her own. They were ghosts now, haunting the walls of a building that had been Nancy's prison and was now their only shield. The crawl space was a throat of dust and fiberglass, suffocating and hot. Nancy led the way, crawling on hands and knees over rough plywood, listening to the labored drag of Min-tae's body behind her. Every few feet, his breath hitched, a wet, ragged sound that echoed too loudly in the confined dark. They reached a junction where the maintenance tunnel widened near a bundle of steaming pipes. Nancy stopped, turning back to check on him. In the faint amber glow leaking from a service grate overhead, Min-tae looked like a corpse that refused to cool. "We need to rest," she whispered, reaching out to steady him. Her hand brushed the ink curling up his neck, damp with sweat. Min-tae didn't pull away. He leaned his head back against a steel beam, eyes half closed. "You know what they are," he murmured, sensing her gaze on the tattoos. "Gang signs," Nancy said, the fear momentarily dulled by exhaustion. "History," he corrected, his voice faint but steel-hard. "I am the dragon head of the 7-star syndicate. They aren't just ink. They're a contract." He gestured vaguely to the chaotic patterns disappearing beneath his bloody collar. "Order. Structure. My brother, he wants to burn the code. He wants to flood these streets with synthetics, turn Chicago into a war zone. I was the only thing stopping the fire." Nancy stared at him. Up in the penthouse, he was a myth, a monster she read about in terrified whispers. Down here, covered in dust and his own blood, he was just a man trying to hold back the tide. "A lot of good the code did you," she said softly, checking the bandage at his waist. Min-tae let out a dry, humorless laugh that turned into a cough. "Arrogance. I thought I was untouchable." He turned his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made the air in the tunnel feel thinner. "I walked through this hotel 1,000 times. I saw the marble, the gold, the security, but I never saw you. Not once." Nancy stiffened. It was the truth of her life. Part of the furniture, easily replaced, easily ignored. "I didn't think the help mattered," Min-tae admitted, his voice rough with shame. He reached out, his blood-stained fingers grazing the sleeve of her uniform. It was a tentative, almost reverent touch. "But the marble didn't save me. The gold didn't save me. You did." Nancy swallowed the lump in her throat. She wasn't used to being seen, certainly not by men like him. "I'm not doing it for you," she lied, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm doing it because I don't want to die." "Then we have the same goal," Min-tae said. "Get me to the elevator, Nancy. And I promise, you'll never be invisible again." Min-tae was burning. Through the fabric of his suit, Nancy could feel the heat radiating off him like a furnace, unnatural and terrifying. His steps had turned into a heavy, dragging shuffle, his weight pressing her shoulder toward the floor. "We can't." "Stairs," he mumbled, his head lolling. "Too many floors." Nancy gritted her teeth, adjusting her grip on his waist. "We aren't taking the stairs." She kicked open the door to the 14th floor utility room. The smell of industrial bleach and damp cotton hit them. In the center of the wall was a stainless steel hatch, polished and gaping like a silver mouth, the laundry chute. "Express elevator," Nancy said, though her stomach twisted at the drop. It dumped straight into the B2 sorting room, right next to the garage. Min-tae peered into the dark, cylindrical void. He swayed, gripping the rim. "It's a steep drop." "Better than a bullet," Nancy countered. "Wrap your arms around me. Protect your head. I'll try to take the friction." He didn't argue. There was no fight left in him, only a fever-bright trust. He climbed awkwardly into the chute, pulling Nancy against his chest. For a second, surrounded by cold metal, they were tangled together in a bizarre embrace. "Ready? Go." She let go. Gravity took them instantly. The world became a blurring, sickening rush of dark metal and rushing wind. The chute spiraled, tossing them against the sides. Nancy screamed, the sound lost in the roar of the descent. It was seconds that felt like hours, a chaotic tumble of limbs and terror until, wham! They hit the bottom with a bone-jarring crash. They didn't land in a soft pile of clouds, but a dense, suffocating mountain of soiled sheets and heavy canvas bags. The impact knocked the wind out of Nancy, leaving her gasping in the humid air of the basement. Beside her, Min-tae made a sound that was less human and more wounded animal. Nancy scrambled up, wading through the sea of gray linens. Min-tae, she found him sprawled on his back, eyes squeezed shut, teeth clenched so hard his jaw muscle jumped. The makeshift bandage at his side was gone. The white dress shirt, already ruined, was now soaking through with fresh, bright red blood. The impact had torn the stitches. No, no, no. Nancy whimpered, her hands hovering over the wound, useless and shaking. I fixed it. I fixed it. Min-tae's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. His skin was scorching hot, his grip weak. Nancy, he gasped, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. Leave me. Get to the car. Shut up, she sobbed, tears finally spilling over, mixing with the grime on her face. They were in the bowels of the hotel, surrounded by filth, bleeding out in the dark. They had fallen as far as they could go. I'm not leaving you in the trash. The hum of the industrial dryers was a deafening roar, a mechanical heartbeat that vibrated through the concrete floor. Nancy dragged Kang Min-tae through the maze of rolling canvas carts, her breath tearing at her lungs. He was little more than dead weight now, his feet dragging, leaving a trail of bright arterial red on the gray concrete. Come on, she sobbed, hitching him higher, almost to the garage, just a little further. The heavy steel door at the far end of the sorting room swung open. Nancy froze, pulling Min-tae behind a towering stack of towels. But the figure that stepped through wasn't wearing tactical gear. It was a slovenly uniform, a peaked cap, and a heavy belt. Gary, Nancy gasped, relief hitting her so hard her knees nearly buckled. It was Gary, the night shift guard who usually sat in the security booth complaining about his pension and sneaking her peppermint candies. He blinked, squinting into the dim light. Nancy, what the hell are you doing down here? The whole building is on lockdown. Gary, please. She stepped out, desperation making her reckless. She gestured to the heap of man behind her. I need help. He's hurt. We need to get to the garage. Gary hurried forward, his face etched with concern. Hurt? Who? He stopped cold. His eyes fell on Min-tae. Min-tae was slumped against the cart, pale as death, but his eyes were open. He looked at Gary with a predator's recognition, even while bleeding out. Gary's gaze dropped to the expensive, ruined suit, then to the tattoos creeping up Min-tae's neck, the dragon scales. The kindness evaporated from the old man's face, replaced by a greedy, terrified calculation. His hand went to his belt, not to his radio, but to his holster. Gary, Nancy took a step back, confusion warring with fear. We just need a car. Nancy, move, Gary said, his voice unrecognizable. He drew his service revolver, the motion clumsy but lethal. He leveled it not at her, but at Min-tae's head. That's him. That's the target. What are you doing? Nancy screamed, throwing herself between the gun and Min-tae. It's me. It's Nancy. Move, girl. Gary barked, sweat beading on his upper lip. Do you know how much the bounty is? 5 million. Cash. That's my pension. That's my life. He's a person, Gary. He's a corpse that walks. Min-tae rasped from the floor. He tried to lift his hand, tried to summon the strength to fight, but his arm fell uselessly to his side. He looked up at Nancy, his eyes dark with resignation. Step aside, Nancy. He won't shoot you. He just wants the money. Smart man. Gary's hand shook, the gun wavering. Step aside, Nancy. I don't want to hurt you, but I'm not walking away from $5 million. Nancy looked at the man she'd shared coffee with, the man she trusted, and saw nothing but a stranger with a gun. The betrayal cut deeper than the fear. There was no safety here, no friends, Just the wolf and the sheep. And she was done being the sheep. Red vipers. Gary spoke into his radio, his eyes flicking away from Nancy for a split second to check the frequency. I have the package in the laundry. Sector 4. He's down. Nancy didn't think. Thinking was for the girl who worried about tuition and folding towels. This was purely animal. She lunged not at Gary, but at the industrial garment steamer standing like a chrome sentinel beside the pressing table. It was live, hissing softly, the pressure gauge dangerously high. With a grunt of effort, Nancy kicked the locking wheel release and swung the heavy, pressurized nozzle. She aimed for the face. A jet of scalding white fog erupted with the shriek of a banshee. It hit Gary point blank. He didn't just yell. He howled, a raw sound of shock and agony. He dropped the radio, clawing at his boiling eyes, skin instantly blistering red. The revolver clattered to the concrete, skidding away into the shadows. Nancy didn't stop. The steam clouded the room, a thick, suffocating mist, but she knew the layout. She dove for the floor, her knees slamming against the hard cement. Her fingers scrambled blindly in the grime until they closed around cold steel. The gun. She rolled onto her back, leveling the weapon with both hands. Her arms shook violently, the barrel wavering in the steam. Gary was on his knees, whimpering, incapacitated and blind. He wasn't a threat anymore. He was just a broken old man who had made a bad bet. Nancy lowered the gun, her breath coming in jagged gasps. She looked at Min-tae. He was watching her through the clearing mist. His expression held no surprise, only a dark, terrifying respect. He looked at the gun in her hand, then up to her eyes. He didn't ask for it. He waited to see what she would do. Nancy walked over to him. She didn't offer him comfort. She knelt and placed the heavy revolver into his bloody palm. "Can you shoot?" she asked, her voice sounding strange to her own ears, flat, hard, unrecognizable. Min-tae's fingers curled around the grip, the weapon acting like a shot of adrenaline to his system. His eyes sharpened. Yes. He checked the chamber with a fluid, practiced motion, then looked back at her. The barrier between them, the invisible wall between the guest and the help, the king and the peasant, was gone. It had been burned away by the steam. "You crossed the line, Nancy," he said quietly. "There's no going back to the card after this." Nancy looked at her hands. They were trembling, but they were empty. She had picked up a weapon and used it. She had hurt someone to survive. "I know," she said, pulling him to his feet. "So let's finish it." "It stops here," Min-tae said, checking the cylinder of the revolver. He leaned heavily against the steel wall of the service elevator, his face gray, but his eyes burning with a cold, terrifying focus. "If we leave the hotel, Ji-hoon hunts us forever. We cut the head off the snake, or we die running." Nancy looked at the master key card she'd stripped from Gary's belt. It was a skeleton key to the entire kingdom. "The penthouse," she said, her voice steady. "He's celebrating." She swiped the card. The panel flashed green, bypassing the lockdown protocols. The elevator jerked upward, rising past the floors of sleeping guests, rising toward the war room. "I need you to be what you've always been," Min-tae rasped, positioning himself on the bottom rack of the oversized housekeeping cart, pulling the heavy canvas laundry bag over his crouched form. "Invisible." "Not anymore," Nancy whispered, but she covered him. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. The penthouse was a riot of noise, bass-heavy music, the clink of crystal, and the roar of victory. Jun, Min-tae's younger brother, stood on the balcony, a glass of champagne in one hand, surrounded by the traitorous lieutenants of the Red Vipers. They were laughing, drunk on power and expensive scotch. Nancy pushed the cart into the room. The wheels rattled over the transition from tile to plush carpet. For a long moment, no one noticed. She was just part of the background, a faceless uniform pushing a car of towels. She rolled it into the center of the room, stopping directly between the wet bar and the balcony. "Hey!" Ji-hoon turned, his smile slipping into a sneer. He waved his glass dismissively. Who let the help in? Get out. We're busy. A guard stepped forward, reaching for Nancy's arm. You heard him. Move. Nancy didn't flinch. She didn't look down. For the first time in her life, she looked the man in the expensive suit dead in the eye. Room service, she said, her voice cutting through the music. She kicked the wheel lock on the cart. The canvas bag exploded outward. Min-tae rose from the bottom shelf like a demon unearthing himself from a grave. He didn't look injured. He looked like Judgment Day. The guard closest to Nancy dropped before he even cleared his holster, a single shot to the chest. The room erupted. Champagne glasses shattered. Screams tore through the music. Ji-hoon froze, his face draining of color as he stared at the brother he thought was dead. Ghost, someone screamed. Min-tae didn't waste breath on words. He used the cart as cover, firing with ruthless precision. Nancy dropped to the floor, covering her head as glass rained down around her. She wasn't just a distraction anymore. She was the door that had let the wolf in. The invisibility was gone. The war was here. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. It rang in Nancy's ears, a high-pitched whine competing with the smell of cordite and spilled scotch. Ji-hoon lay on the balcony tiles, the Chicago skyline reflecting in his unseeing eyes. The usurpers were scattered across the penthouse, silenced by the ghost they thought they had buried. Kang Min-tae stood amidst the ruin of his brother's victory party, the revolver hanging loosely at his side, smoke curling from the barrel. He swayed, the adrenaline finally receding to reveal the ruin of his body. He turned slowly, searching the room. He expected to see the maid cowering behind the bar or running for the elevator, fleeing the monster she had unleashed. Instead, Nancy was walking toward him. She stepped over a shattered champagne flute, her face streaked with grease and soot, her uniform torn at the shoulder. She didn't look at the bodies. She looked only at him. You're bleeding through the bandage, she said, her voice flat and practical. She reached out, not to push him away, but to press a linen napkin against the reopening wound on his side. Min-tae flinched, then froze, staring at her hands. They were steady. Nancy, he breathed, the name feeling foreign in this room of death. You should leave. Go, before the police comes. And go where? Nancy peeled the blood-soaked fabric away, inspecting the damage with a critical eye. Back to the locker room? Back to cleaning up messes like this for minimum wage. Min-tae holstered the gun. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a money clip thick with cash, blood-stained at the edges. I will give you everything. Enough money to disappear. A new identity. You save the dragon head. The syndicate pays its debts. Nancy looked at the cash. It was more than she would make in 10 lifetimes. It was freedom. It was safety. She didn't take it. She looked up, meeting his gaze with a hardness that hadn't been there yesterday. The terrified girl who hid in the wardrobe was gone, burned away by the steam and the gunfire. I don't want to pay off, Nancy said. Money runs out. Safety is an illusion. I'll learn that tonight. Then what? Min-tae asked, intrigued despite his exhaustion. What do you want? Nancy looked around the penthouse, the command center of the Obsidian Tower, the fortress that controlled the city. She knew every secret passage, every camera blind spot, every weakness in the walls. She knew this building better than the architects, better than the security team, better than him. I know how this hotel breathes, she said. I know how you got in, and I know how nearly you died because your security was blind. You need eyes that see the things you ignore. She took the master key card from her pocket, the one she'd stolen from Gary, and held it up. I don't want charity, Min-tae. I want the keys. I want the hotel. Min-tae stared at her for a long beat. Then, a slow, bloody smile touched his lips. He saw the evolution. He saw the queen standing in the wreckage of the court. Done, he said. The Obsidian Tower no longer hummed with the artificial, indifferent silence of a gilded cage. It hummed with the low, vibrating frequency of a fortress. Nancy D. Pratt stood in the center of the atrium, the soles of her Italian leather heels clicking softly against the marble, a sharp, authoritative sound that replaced the squeak of worn-out sneakers. She wore charcoal silk now, tailored to a razor's edge, a stark contrast to the baggy polyester uniform that had once rendered her invisible. She scanned the floor. To the untrained eye, it was just a bustling luxury lobby. But Nancy saw the grid. She saw the new security detail positioned at the blind spots she had identified. She saw the concierge signaling a high-priority arrival using the hand gestures she had codified. She saw the invisible currents of the building, and this time, she controlled the tide. Ms. Pratt, the head of security, murmured, touching his earpiece as he approached. The senator's delegation is secure in the East Wing. We found a listening device in the sweep. I know, Nancy said, not breaking her stride. I flagged the maintenance request for that room yesterday. The tech didn't have a badge ID on the roster. Did you trace it? We did. It's handled. The guard looked at her with a mix of fear and reverence. Good catch, ma'am. Details, Marcus, she said smoothly. The devil is in the details. She paused near the grand staircase, the feeling of being watched prickling the back of her neck. It wasn't the cold, predatory sensation of a hitman anymore. It was a warm, heavy weight she had grown to crave. She glanced up. Kang Min-tae stood on the mezzanine, his hands resting on the brass railing. He was immaculate in a navy suit, the collar crisp and high, concealing the dragons that curled up his throat. The scar on his side was healed, a jagged souvenir of the night the world ended and began again. He wasn't looking at the senator's delegation. He wasn't scanning for threats. He didn't have to. He was looking at her. For years, the seven-star syndicate had relied on fear and muscle to hold their ground. But Min-tae had learned the hard way that muscle bleeds and fear can be bought. Now, he had something better. He had the woman who knew how to walk through walls. Min-tae caught her eye and offered a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a bow to a queen, nor a command to a servant. It was an acknowledgement between partners. I am the sword, his eyes seemed to say, but you are the shield. Nancy allowed a small, sharp smile to touch her lips. She turned back to the lobby, the general manager of the Obsidian Tower, the keeper of the keys, and the only person in Chicago who could tell the dragon what to do. She was no longer just surviving the shift. She owned the building.